The iron chains rattled against weathered wood as Ayanna was dragged onto the platform in Dry Creek's town square. 3 days without food had left her weak, but her eyes, black as obsidian and twice as sharp, held nothing but defiance. The crowd gathered like vultures, their faces obscured by the gunmetal light of an approaching storm. She had survived the raid that killed her family, survived the march through the Sonoran wasteland. But this, standing before leering men who saw her as property, this was a death of another kind. "Lot 17, the auctioneer bellowed, tobacco-stained teeth gleaming. "Apache squaw, young, strong, can cook, clean, probably other things too." Laughter rippled through the assembly like a disease. Ayanna's fingers curled into fists despite the manacles. She would not cry, would not give them the satisfaction. In her language, her name meant eternal blossom, but there would be no blooming in chains. The bidding started at $50. Silas McCade stood at the back of the crowd, dust from the trail still clinging to his duster coat. He'd ridden into Dry Creek an hour ago seeking supplies, nothing more. But the moment he saw her on that platform, spine straight as a lodgepole pine despite the irons, chin lifted like royalty facing execution, something fractured inside his chest. He'd seen this before, 6 years ago in Kansas, a different girl, a different auction. He'd done nothing then, told himself it wasn't his business, that one man couldn't change the way of things. He'd carried that silence like a stone in his gut ever since. 75, someone shouted. A rancher Silas recognized, Dalton Creech, known for working his horses until they dropped and his hired men until they quit. Ayanna's gaze swept the crowd, and for a heartbeat, her eyes locked with Silas's. In that moment, he saw past the defiance to the terror beneath, the knowledge of what awaited her in Creech's hands, or the hands of any man here. She was scared, though she'd sooner swallow hot coals than show it. 100, Creech called out, grinning. Silas felt his boots carrying him forward before his mind caught up. His hand rose. 200. The crowd fell silent, heads turning. Even the auctioneer paused mid-sentence. Creech's smile died. "Who the hell—" 300, Silas said, his voice carrying the weight of old gunfights and older regrets. His hand moved to rest on the Colt at his hip. Not a threat, just a reminder of who he'd been. Who he might still be if pressed. On the platform, Ayanna's expression shifted. The cowboy stepping forward wasn't like the others, his face weathered but not cruel, his eyes shadowed with something that looked almost like shame, but he was still buying her, still reducing her to dollars and cents. When their eyes met again, she spoke for the first time, her English broken but clear enough to stop hearts. "I'd rather die than be yours." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Silas paid the auctioneer in crisp bills that cleaned out most of his savings, took the key to her chains, and led Ayanna toward his horse without a word. She walked 3 paces behind, refusing to look at him, her mind racing through possibilities of escape. The moment he unchained her, she would run. If he caught her, she would fight. If he overpowered her, she would find a way to die on her own terms. At the hitching post, Silas stopped, turned. The key glinted in his palm as he studied her face, taking in the bruises, the dried blood at her temple, the warrior's pride that no amount of brutality could strip away. "I'm going to unlock these," he said quietly. "Then you're free to go wherever you want. North, south, back to your people if you can find them. I won't stop you." Ayanna's breath caught. Trick. Had to be. Men didn't spend $300 just to let property walk away. "Why?" The word emerged rough, suspicious. Silas was silent for a long moment, watching storm clouds gather on the horizon like dark thoughts taking shape. "Because I should have done it 6 years ago for someone else. Didn't have the courage then." He unlocked the manacles. Let them fall to the dirt. Reckon I'm trying to buy back something I lost, but you don't owe me redemption, girl. You don't owe me anything. The iron fell away, and Ayanna stood frozen, rubbing her raw wrists, caught between disbelief and instinct. Freedom. Right there. She could run. Should run. But sunset was coming, and she had no food, no water, no weapon. The desert that had once been home was now occupied by soldiers and settlers. Her people were scattered, perhaps dead. And this cowboy with haunted eyes was offering something no man here would. Choice. "You have a ranch?" she asked, hating the practicality that made her ask. "Small spread. 20 miles west. Got a spare room you could have. Pay you fair wages if you wanted to stay and help with chores. Or I could stake you supplies, point you toward the Apache territories." "If I come," she said slowly, testing the shape of it, "I come as free woman, not slave, not wife, not anything else. Yes, ma'am. And I keep knife." The corner of Silas's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Wouldn't dream of asking you to give it up." She studied him for another moment, reading the truth in the lines around his eyes, the weight he carried in his shoulders. Then she nodded once. "I come. For now." The ride to Silas's ranch stretched through 2 days of desert and scrubland. They spoke little, but Ayanna watched everything, the way he handled his horse with quiet respect, how he divided their rations equally, the fact that he never once touched her or looked at her with hunger in his eyes. At night, he gave her the bedroll and slept propped against his saddle with his rifle across his lap, keeping watch as if she were worth protecting. It confused her. Made her angry, because it would have been easier if he'd been a monster. 3 months passed like a slow thaw. Ayanna kept to herself at first, sleeping in the spare room, doing chores with mechanical efficiency, maintaining the walls she'd built. But Silas's ranch was small, and silence was hard to keep. He taught her about cattle without condescension. She taught him words in her language, not because he asked, but because one evening he mispronounced "thank you" so badly it startled a laugh out of her, and the sound surprised them both. She learned he'd been a cavalry scout once, before he saw too many things that hollowed him out. That he'd bought this failing ranch with blood money he wanted to wash clean with honest work. That he read books by lamplight, actual books. Worn copies of poetry and philosophy that seemed at odds with his scarred knuckles. He learned she'd been training to be a medicine woman before the raid. That she could track a rabbit through hardpan and identify healing plants white doctors had never heard of. That she sang sometimes when she thought she was alone. Songs of her people, mournful and beautiful enough to stop his heart. The walls came down in inches. The night it happened, a storm had rolled in, the violent kind that turned the sky purple and made the earth tremble. Ayanna stood on the porch watching lightning split the darkness, remembering another storm the night her village burned. She didn't hear Silas approach until he spoke. "You afraid of thunder?" "No." She paused. "Of what comes with it sometimes." He understood without explanation. Stood beside her, careful to leave space, watching the rain silver the desert. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. For what my people did to yours. For what they're still doing. Sorry doesn't fix it, but—" "No, it doesn't." She turned to face him, studying this man who'd somehow become familiar. "But you are not them. You are different." "I'm trying to be." The air between them shifted, charged like the storm itself. Ayanna felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Not with fear this time, but with something more dangerous. Something she'd sworn she'd never feel for a white man. Silas. His name felt foreign on her tongue, but she spoke it anyway. "When I said I would rather die than be yours, you meant it, I know. I meant it then." She stepped closer, close enough to see the silver in his stubble, the vulnerability in his eyes. "But I am not sure I mean it now." His breath caught. "Ayanna, I choose this," she said fiercely. "You understand? I choose. Not because you bought me, not because I have nowhere else. I choose you." When he kissed her, it was tentative, reverent, like a man who'd been granted something holy he didn't deserve. She kissed him back with all the fire she'd hidden, all the life they'd tried to beat out of her. Rain pounded the roof, and lightning painted them in stark relief, two damaged souls finding shelter in each other. They married that winter in a ceremony that honored both their traditions, Apache and Christian mixed together like blood and water becoming something new. The town gossiped, of course. Some refused to trade with Silas anymore, but he'd spent years caring what the world thought, and he was done. Ayanna bloomed in freedom like her name promised. She turned part of the ranch into an herb garden, treating settlers and Apache alike when they came seeking healing. Silas worked beside her, learning to see the land through her eyes, understanding that redemption wasn't a destination, but a daily choice. Years later, when their daughter asked how they met, Ayanna told the truth, the ugly parts and the beautiful ones. How she'd stood on that auction block ready to die rather than surrender. How a cowboy with ghosts in his eyes had stepped forward and offered something she'd never expected: dignity. "But weren't you scared?" their daughter asked. "Terrified," Ayanna admitted, tucking the girl against her side. "But fear means you are still alive, still fighting. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, you find someone worth fighting beside instead of against." Silas, listening from the doorway, caught his wife's eye and smiled. The real kind, the kind that reached his soul. The desert wind carried their story across the years, a testament that even in the hardest soil, under the most unforgiving sun, love could take root and grow. Thanks for staying to the end. Where are you watching from?